Life back.
And it's Leanne Bonnell with Grit and Grace.
Welcome to tonight's episode of Take Your Life Back with Grit and Grace. Um, Tonight's topic is about building employee relationships. And I'm kind of excited about this topic. I think in today's job market, this is a big one. Um, Given all that has occurred over the last year, going through an ongoing pandemic, as it would seem. Um,
Did I roll
the
my eyes? Did we get that on camera?
well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it seems to never. We went home over a year ago for 2 weeks, and it's just not ending. Um, and then, for so many people, that meant a shift in their workplace. It meant a shift for what their work looked like. Some people lost their jobs. Some people became recognized finally as an essential worker. Just lots of changes. And so tonight's topic really is about building those employee relationships and the importance of doing that. I mean, obviously, you always want to have those positive employee relationships, any kind of working relationship, right? I want to have a good relationship with my management, and I'd like for my management to have a good relationship with me. Um, but it goes in all working relationships. So yeah. So I have the should I say the luxury, the
Privilege?
privilege. I do. I have the privilege of being what we are calling a culture captain within my organization, because while many it was actually many moons ago at this point, we were a small startup company. As what happens with startups, it's really easy to have someone who has a vision and starts a small company, but then as you grow, if that vision and mission and purpose and values, if those are not clearly defined, developed, and trained on, then your employees will kind of develop their own kind of little side pockets of cultures. And so you really want to make sure that that's clearly defined. And so, as a culture captain, I get to help really define what our culture is. And over the course of last year, I had an opportunity to help chime in on what our mission and values are. And our vision statement, and that's been super exciting. So I get to do that. And one of the really good questions that came up recently were some thoughts on having an anonymous employee suggestion or an anonymous Dear HR inbox, if you will. And the question was posed on what we all thought about having an anonymous opportunity to ask questions or maybe vent or provide suggestions, or it could be any of those things, anywhere in the spectrum there. But an anonymous box, and that was the question posed to us, and I felt like it brought a really interesting conversation to the table. So I'm curious, Leanne, because I know you worked in manufacturing for many years and in many different environments. Anywhere from you could be on the shop floor, you could be at a desk. I'm curious your thoughts on um, having an anonymous Dear HR, if you will.
I think it's a fantastic idea for several reasons. Um, I did work in automotive. I worked in telecommunications. I worked in heavy industry. In each of those industries, trying to think. I even worked in payday loans. I was an engineer in payday loans. I have no idea. They paid me a lot of money out of business school. But every company I have ever worked at has had either a suggestion program or a way to talk to HR with an anonymous way, so that they don't know who you are. We also had, I know at GM, we had a phone number you could call. I can't
Yeah.
even, like an EDP or something like that. It was an employee telephone number, a number that you could call and you could talk to someone and they could help you through crisis. So there were many things that were just absolutely anonymous and available. It seems that it just I wouldn't think of it as anything but normal to have someone or some phone number to call. Um, with us being separated now, I think it's just absolutely essential that we have something in that realm now, especially because of the isolation that we may feel. I
Mm,
mean, I think I've said on here several times that I had a coworker that would come in every morning and give me a giant bear hug. That's just who he is, and I cared. I did not care that he did that because I knew him and I knew his wife, and it was just him. But other people would have gotten probably offended, and they could have used those anonymous resources. Um, so back to us all being separate now, there's a higher level of anxiety in our workforce because we are separate. There and my husband and I were actually talking about this, about how sad it is, kind of, because a lot of those networking meetings happened after the 5 o'clock hour. You'd go to the bar with, your counterpart or a mentor. There's a lot of back of the napkin things that aren't being done now that is fantastic work, or was fantastic work back in the day. So yeah, having an outlet, having an opportunity to speak to HR in a non identifiable way, I think is just, it's very necessary because, people are people, people are gossips, HR people aren't perfect. And um, I know there were many times where I was scared to go to HR because I didn't want them to take something that was perfectly innocent or something I had a question about and turn it into the most unbelievably, scandalous thing that they could think of. And yeah, so anonymous
right.
is, now I don't know technology wise. I'm not the technology guru. That's more your department. I don't know how they would make an anonymous email because everybody's email has their name on it. But you got to figure out something. And you work for a technology company, so I'm sure that y'all can figure out something.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, so I think there's two things here, right? One, the importance of building relationships with your employees really just kind of amplified once a lot of us went remote, because you're no longer having those face-to-face conversations, so you're not able to be there to read body language, or you can't always read tone. So really making sure that you're having those one-on-ones with your employees, and doing things to build that relationship, having those team meetings where you do something fun, you allow for a little water cooler chat in whatever way that you can, because it's through that you really have some of the real team building,
Hmm.
and that's really where you do build some of those relationships. And then as I get to thinking about that with regards to kind of a Dear HR or an anonymous employee suggestion box or question box, whatever we want to call it, um, you know, we already have this generation that's been coming up who has always communicated behind a computer screen.
Yep.
And now we all went remote. And so now we really just kind of reaffirmed that communication style of being behind that computer screen. So I think we need to be very open, and I guess empathetic to recognizing, okay, we do need to meet them where they're at just a little bit. And they're used to having social media platforms or whatever the platform is, where you can go into, and I'll use Facebook as an example, you can go into a Facebook group and make a post anonymously
Yeah.
and ask a question in a group. If these are the type of communication tools that our employees coming into the workforce are used to using, we do kind of need to figure out how do we meet them there, and then what else could we be doing to strengthen and build those relationships so that they don't feel like they do always have to be anonymous. um,
Mhm.
Obviously, the ultimate goal would be that if they're struggling or they're having a problem, they would have a very open relationship with their direct supervisor, or even above, or their HR department, where they could simply freely go in and have a conversation and ask the question or the dilemma that they're having. It could even be as simple as it's not so much of a dilemma, they just aren't sure how to approach it. Maybe they just need some coaching, you know, some relationship coaching, and it goes both ways. Maybe our supervisors need some relationship coaching. Who's not to say that it, instead of calling it an employee suggestion box, maybe it's some managers, maybe they're newer managers and they're like, I got this problem, I don't want to just go to HR with this problem because I don't want HR to think I can't do my job, but I don't know how to handle this with this employee. So I think having an anonymous dear HR employee suggestion, whatever we want to say, is really a tool of empowerment, because it's offering them a platform that they are probably used to communicating through, and it allows us to meet employees where I think they're at right now. Right, we've all just been separated and we're living remote. um, and I actually think it could help build. I mean, the ultimate goal, of course, through all of that would be that we could somehow create a bridge that would get them to a point where they could just have a direct conversation with leadership or HR, or whoever that may be. Um, but I think it's vital. I think whether it be a hotline, and once you said that, I recalled I've had some other employers who did have a hotline. In fact, I had one employer who you had a hotline where you could go in and anonymously report anything that you saw that was questionable,
Mhm.
um, that
Yeah.
may be a risk item, that
Yep.
might be, any of those things. And you called the hotline and you shared that information, and it went from there. Um, I actually think it's almost critical to have that platform
Yeah.
available.
Yes. And you brought up an interesting point, and I don't even know if you know that you brought up this point, but intergenerational, we work in an intergenerational workplace. The baby boomers are leaving, they're retiring, they're going off and doing their thing. Um, Eric is at the tail end of the baby boomers, so he's about to start on that retirement stage. Um, but you have intergenerational workplaces where, yeah, the millennials and the, what do they call those? The Xenials or something? I don't know.
Uh-huh. The Gen Z, yeah,
Yeah, they came up behind a computer screen. Absolutely right. But then there's us, the Gen Xers,
in the
the
middle.
baby boomers, those of us who are sandwiched in between those two, and we're all like, yeah, we don't like either of you. Just kidding. No, we're seriously. Anyway, who grew up halfway behind a computer screen, we still rode our bikes. We still went out and played in the dirt. Um, and we know allegedly how to communicate better with our
Allegedly.
peers, allegedly. But we know how to communicate with our peers face to face. We may not be so good on the computer, but excuse me, we are good face to face. So it's interesting. You the like the let's say like the Gen Y and back. I think Gen Y is technically millennial, but I don't really think of it that way. But the Gen Y and back, I wonder how comfortable they would be by submitting something anonymously.
Mm.
Where like the Gen Zs and the millennials, they're like, yeah, take my life. Here it is. I'm Instagramming. Aren't I pretty? And And some, the older generations, there's some Gen Xers that are doing the Instagram, I'm so pretty, blah, 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 but not so much with the baby boomers and that crowd. Um, Me in particular, I tend to like to stay private or more private. So you'll see, like, I'll post something with a picture that I took, on vacation 6 months ago. And people are like, oh, wow, are you at blah, blah, blah? No, no, not today. Oh, you didn't tell us, you didn't post. Yep, you're right. Because I didn't want to.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just curious about how that would, how an anonymous post or I guess an anonymous email, anonymous posting, something like that might, I just don't know. I don't know how the older generations would act because we still do have a multi-generational workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we've even, some employees, and this got, I've heard this example. There are some employees who they they feel like they're bothering somebody if they go to them with a problem. So, even if they just have a very simple question, it could be a job task related question, and they'll approach it with, I'm so sorry to bother you. I don't want to bother you. I hope this is a quick question. You don't have to help me, but here's my question.
Yeah.
And they struggle to even ask the question. And so I think, especially for those people, while obviously we would like to coach them and say, there's never a need to be sorry, you can ask anything. And, I'll figure out, if we need to schedule time because it is a more in-depth question, a more in-depth conversation, or if this is a quick answer and I can sit down and show you. Um, I think that opportunity should be there. Obviously, we want to be able to coach them to where they can always feel free asking a question. Um, and you want to be able to have some of that appreciative inquiry, right? Of how do you think, how do you think this could work? What were you, I mean, I want to know, right? I don't want to just tell you do it this way. If you're seeing a task that you think could be done differently, please do tell me.
Right. Please,
um
streamline. Please make it go away.
right. I mean, I try and come up with better processes that I see in the moment. That doesn't mean that it's the best process. It's just so if you come on a better way, please. Um,
Please help. Please.
right? But I think, there's those employees too. I really think it's a matter of trying to find that medium of where we can kind of meet people where they're at while also maybe offering some coaching. So like for example, there's a blog that I follow, and I can't remember, I think it's like Dear HR Manager or something like that. But I love the responses to her questions because people will submit anonymous questions, anonymous scenarios, and it could be submitted by someone in management, it could be submitted by somebody entry level, it really doesn't matter. But in her response, she really does kind of coach them through, hey, here are some response techniques that you could try. And here's, there, I would love to see, so if we had a monthly newsletter, then we could offer some of those answers to things that people are submitting right there in the newsletter. So it would still be very anonymous but would offer some of that coach, because if one person's asking, somebody else also has the question.
At least one
At
somebody else.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a because would your company be considered middle size?
Yeah, we're about 600 employees.
Oh, okay, that's a lot bigger than I thought it was. And because I was thinking more around like 200. So if you have 600 employees and one person has a question, odds are at least three others have it.
Yeah.
And if they don't have it when someone's asking it, they're reading that and going, I wondered about that once upon a time too.
Mm.
So what is I see, I always told everybody I wasn't nice enough to be in HR. My last position, I was the only female engineer. I sat at one end of the cubicle farm and HR sat at the other. And people will walk in from the floor and I'd be sitting at my desk doing some complex, math they didn't even know, right? And they're like, I remember so distinctly, people walking to my desk and going, asking about benefits, asking about whatever. And I'm like, you want HR, don't you? Yeah. Because, yeah. So, of course, go ask an engineer. And I always told the HR ladies I was never, ever going to be in HR because I just wasn't nice enough. Because for all the whining and complaining that they listen to, I tell these people to buck up and get with it. But what you're talking about is actual real information that somebody may need to finish their job or to, I don't know, it could be something as simple as, hey, I'm in job X. I love my manager, but I see a growth opportunity. How do I talk to my manager about wanting to move over into that growth opportunity? And can they even help me get to that growth opportunity?
Yes.
You know,
Because your manager should be having a conversation with you about your career path at least once a year. I know my manager does it during my yearly review, and we have an entire conversation of how are you liking your role? Where else would you like to learn? What are an entire career path conversation. Now, that's assuming two things, right? That's assuming that all managers are having that conversation. And
no, they're not.
they're probably not, especially if maybe you're a newer manager, and by all means, I don't want to just make the assumption that there's poor management. I don't think that's
Well,
the case.
not at all.
I think, it's new manager, or maybe you're not a new manager, but maybe you never had a manager show you how to have that conversation, and you were never given the privilege of such a conversation. So it doesn't occur. So yeah, sure, and you know how it is. You start a job and HR says, okay, you're going to log into this learning management software and you're going to take all these courses. They're all an hour long, and you sit there for the next week and you click through the courses, and your brain is absolute mush. And probably somewhere in there is some training on how you should do your review, and you kind of just clicked through it because you just wanted to be done with it. It was required, whatever the scenario. That doesn't mean that you're a bad manager. You're a human being.
It means
Uh,
you're out of your mind.
right? Like we all go through those training things. And so, for, an employee to have a simple question like, how do I approach this with my manager of, hey, I'm seeing some other opportunities. I might have an interest, or I'd like to stay where I'm at, but I'd kind of like to start dipping my toes over there.
Yeah.
Um, I just don't feel comfortable. I'm afraid that my manager will get upset and think I'm just ready to leave.
And then I'll get fired.
And
And
then I'll get fired.
our minds don't go to the best case scenario. We are hardwired to go to the worst case scenario because back in the day, that kept us alive.
Right.
So, and our brains have not evolved. And we think a lot with our hindbrain or our, I forget what they called it in HCI, critter brain. So we think
Yes.
a lot with our hindbrain or our critter brain, when we should be thinking about this with our forebrain and using logic. But our critter brain kicks in because, frankly, y'all, if that saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, you aren't sitting there asking it questions. You're running and getting the hell out of there so you stay alive. And I think in cases like, hey, there might be a position over here. It's a growth opportunity. I'm super excited. How do I move to the conversation? Not even just moving the position. I just want to, how do I approach this, right?
Yes.
And, if you're an employee who's been there a couple of years and you've, let's say, real life scenario, in the first year at GM, I had 3 bosses. It wasn't me, it was them. They kept moving. And then they'd come in and they'd get reorged, or one would get promoted or whatever. But I had 3 bosses in a year. I never got a chance to know a boss. to even, if I had a career conversation with one, it doesn't mean that in a handoff it was transferred.
Right.
So I was constantly working with a stranger, and things like that. You need to have some nuance and some advice, I think, because I would have just gone in there and go, I want this job. It's so awesome. I don't know you, but I want that job. So, yeah, I really think that a newsletter format, an anonymous posting format, an anonymous email format, whatever it is,
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't have to be negative, right? I mean,
no, not
I
at all.
do think those phone numbers where we talked earlier about some of those numbers to report an incident or to, I mean, those are good. I don't want to, but we don't want to assume that somebody wants to submit something anonymously because it's negative. It could just be as simple as their critter brain is kicking in and they just want to know how to have a conversation. Maybe they've never had a conversation like that before. They've just taken whatever. If mom and dad said, "Hey, you should go apply for that job," they applied for the job, they got it, and then they sat there.
And maybe mom and dad are blue collar, and they've put the same nut in the same hole, no, the same screw in the same hole, followed by the same nut for the last 40 years. And that's all they've ever wanted to do. And you have gone to college, you are pursuing a profession, and you're sitting there going, Mom, Dad, what do I do? And they're like, you put the screw in the hole and you tighten the nut. What do you mean, what
Right.
do I do? Um, and it's an easier way to help figure things out, and having some type of mentor or um, something like that available, just have
Mm.
it available. It
Because
doesn't
you
mean
bring up
that
another
people
good
have
point.
hmm?
The other good point is, look at the course of the last year and through 2020, we have had some turnover, and some
Hmm.
of that has been management.
Hmm.
So we could be sitting with employees who have had three bosses in 1 year,
Hmm.
and they just don't know how to approach these conversations.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a very valid point. I think it's fair enough to say that, hey, if we've had turnover, we may need to continue to foster open conversations however we can in whatever avenue or medium that might be, whether that's a newsletter, a mailbox, whatever. um, I really think it's important, and I know that the ultimate goal, here in my mind, here's the ultimate goal: that there are conversations happening between employees and management on a regular basis, and there's a strong relationship there, and um, and we don't even need it, right? That would be amazing. It would be amazing that we didn't even need an employee suggestion box, because when an employee thought of a really good idea, they knew exactly who to go to, and it got heard. There was that appreciative inquiry, conversation, and and it was constant and continual week after week. That's the perfect world. But you add in things like suddenly going remote, turnover, all these things, and man, we need some avenues for employees to express themselves and feel heard
Hmm.
and learn. I really believe that this is a learning opportunity, um, to build those relationships in my mind. But yeah.
You are absolutely right. And because we are in the Brave New World scenario, it's going to take a bit. It's going to take a minute for everybody to get their act together and figure out what the best way is to do things. Um, Best practices do not exist right now. And it's just, unfortunately, the way things are at the moment, we are going to have to take a breath, take a step back, and really just let it let it play out. We may have a couple different iterations, but you got to start somewhere, folks. You just got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the easiest place to start is probably a newsletter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the fact that, my organization has chosen to have, some people through from various departments act as like a captain culture or captain culture captain. I had one of my teammates approach me the other day and she said, "Hey, do you guys discuss these kinds of things in your culture captain meetings?" And she's like, "I have a concern. I saw this thing occur." Now, luckily, because on my team we have an amazing manager. She's a VP for a reason. She's very good at what she does. Um, we had already brought this up with her, and I have no doubt that it will make its way through the channels. Um, but it was a really good opportunity. I think my teammate was asking me to share it in the culture captain meeting because her thought was this really does kind of need discussed across the culture captains as, is this kind of the culture we want to help um, develop or that we want to help grow? I mean, it was one of those kinds of questions. And so or foster, I guess that's the word I'm trying to think of. And so I love that our organization has come up with that, so that again, my teammate, if she for whatever reason didn't feel comfortable going to our manager, she at least felt like she could ping me an instant message and say, "Hey, this this made me feel a little uneasy when I saw this incident play out. Could this be discussed? Is this the way we want to go?"
Right.
Great opportunity. Yeah.
It, it is. And it's a great opportunity for someone who is very creative and wants to dip their toe into this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably a potential huge business too. Dang it. Why didn't we come up with this?
I don't know. But it's one of those things, and especially in organizations across the board are really starting to put more focus on diversity and inclusion and all those things. And I think this is another really great opportunity um, to foster those conversations for diversity and inclusion. This is a huge opportunity.
Well, and it's actual diversity and actual inclusion. It's not some puff piece political or, you know, uh,
Right.
cultural garbage. It's actually going in and doing what those words mean, you know,
Right.
actually doing it. So that is just phenomenal. And I really hope your company goes ahead and figures something out
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that works across the 600 person. Uh,
Right.
I want to call it a community company. There's the word, y'all. It's 9:30 at night. I'm spent.
I know. We are on hump day. We're almost in the downhill slide to our week. I think we are tired. But yes, so I think this has been a great conversation. I am super curious how others feel about, how building relationships off of anonymous questions. Is that possible? Can that occur if you stay anonymous? Can you really build a relationship? I'm curious on other people's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I am too. So, you know, leave a comment below. We will read it and we will
Yeah.
get to you because I think that it's well, you know what? I don't know what to think, and I want to hear some different opinions because we could talk on this all night, but we agree.
Right. Yeah, no, so I would love some different opinion. Definitely should it be that, hey, no, you don't get to submit something anonymous, like time to put
Okay.
your adult pants on. We all got to wear our adult pants today.
What?
I know. I'm
Man.
really sad about that.
Yeah, right. I'm just mad about it. Darn it.
I don't know. And someone else could look at that, but I would love to hear the perspective on how we could foster working relationships, and whether having things like anonymous suggestion boxes or dear HR or whatever those different forums are, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. So be sure to comment below. I would be super curious, and I'd be super curious about any experiences others have had with something similar,
Mhm.
because I think that starting those work conversations of about career growth or opportunity, burnout, um, all those things. I mean, some people are scared to.
Sabotage. Yeah.
Some people are scared to ask for more than 1 or 2 days at a time of PTO.
Oh, yeah, no, I never was scared of that. Heck,
You shouldn't be.
ever, ever. You earn that time. That is part of your benefit package. That is part of your paycheck. Go take that time. I
Oh,
would take, I would argue tooth and nail with my last manager about sick time. And he would dilly dally and, dance around. Well, you didn't really do. And I'm like, dude, I earned it. It's on my paycheck. I'm taking it. Bye bye.
I need a mental health day.
Right? I'm taking a vacation day. And I called them all vacation days and I didn't really care. And he's like, but is this sick time? I'm like, you figure it out. I'm taking the time off. Your job is to pay me. My job is to do my job.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And, I went and sat with a friend who had knee surgery. And I went and did my Christmas shopping. It's my time. So it's your time. You earned it.
Yes.
You take it. Unless it rolls over and you want to roll it over and roll it over. But don't ever lose it. Don't ever give it back to them.
No,
Paycheck, folks. Don't ever give it back to them, Jen.
I I did it for years.
Oh, Jen.
I know.
All right. Well, in 2 weeks,
That's a different conversation.
I'll just hold your head under the water and
All right. Well, I think this is a great topic. I think this wraps it up for tonight. I think definitely we should talk at another time about PTO and really just being able
maximize
to,
that baby.
yes,
Mhm.
just even expressing I need a mental health day. I,
Yeah. Well, not only that, but being salaried and having that flex time and how to use it flex time, even if your company doesn't offer it.
right. Oh,
I
that's
got
good.
really good at that.
Oh, let's talk about that. Okay, so that one's on the list.
Okay.
PTO and flex time. Stay tuned for that topic in a future episode.
Oh,
All right. Well, I think we are going to call it a night. Please comment below if you have any suggestions, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. If you also have an idea for a topic that you would like for us to cover based on our experiences or coaching businesses, please be sure to share that as well. So that is all for this week. I'm Jen Ingram with Take Your Life Back.
and I'm Leanne Bonnell with Grit and Grace.
Thank you guys.